So a very good evening to everybody. Just gone 7 o'clock here in the UK on a Sunday evening. Absolutely gorgeous day here in London and across most of the UK. It's also a nice long bank holiday weekend here in the UK. So we get an extra day off tomorrow, which is great news. So welcome to the District 91 webinar for this Sunday evening. If it's your first time here, fantastic to have you along. Where have you been for the other 42 that we've already held? We've been doing this since August, and we've got still a few more to get through before the end of June. Before I introduce our esteemed presenter this evening, just some housekeeping rules if you've not heard these before. If you can please have your video on if at all possible. We understand that some people are hiding from law enforcement and trying to evade capture, but having cameras on really does help when it comes to the audience interaction. You'll see in the top left-hand corner of your screen that we are indeed recording this today. So if you do have a problem, then we understand if people want to turn their cameras off for that. This will be posted onto the D91 YouTube channel over the course of the week, probably towards the end of the week. So if you don't want to be seen on YouTube, then we completely understand that. The whole point about these webinar sessions is that they're quite informal. They're just here to give you some added value to your Toastmasters membership, and hopefully you'll take away a few bits and pieces. Feel free to put your questions into the chat. I'll keep an eye on the chat during the session, and James will also be able to see the chat as well. So if you've got any specific points that you need to raise, then feel free. There will be a chance to do a Q&A at the end, which is always great. So you can ask questions at the end as well. Finally, if you can have your microphones turned off during the session, that would be brilliant, so we don't get distractions. And of course, once we do the Q&A, feel free to turn your microphones back on. So our speaker this evening is a man who many people know as a long-standing Toastmaster, part of District 71, but also known to many people. He's also a trainer. He is also a TEDx speaker, and that's exactly why we've got him here tonight, to share his experience of standing on that red spot and some real pearls of wisdom as to what to do for a TEDx speech and how TEDx really can give your career a boost and also give your speaking skills a real workout as well. So can I ask for a big round of applause, please, this evening, and welcome our speaker, James McGinty.
Thank you very much indeed, Andy. And yes, you can see me in the background there, speaking at TEDx Portobello in Edinburgh. It was a very small, very low budget. You can see they just used chalk to make the sign up rather than spending money on decent graphics, because TED isn't about having big, flashy events. TED, and you can see on the slide there, technology, education, design. The whole point of TED is it's about ideas that are worth sharing. And that might be quite alien, or at least not evident to those of us in Toastmasters, because Toastmasters, it's a very unusual organization. One of the best organizations I've ever belonged to. So I don't criticize it readily, but we do live in a bit of a bubble, and we turn up week after week, month after month, year after year at our clubs, and we get advice, we get feedback, and there are a few advanced speeches, but most of the time we speak in a 7-minute box. And at some clubs, woe betide anyone who gets as far as 7:31. Wouldn't that be a disaster in some clubs? You could be put in front of a firing squad I went to a club and I was giving a table topic, and at 2:31, someone started ringing a bell to tell me to get off the floor. And they may never have rang that bell again, because I did tell them that that was insufficient to persuade me to move away from the floor. But we do have, Toastmasters is not rigid. We can talk about most subjects. We can bring speeches of great worth there, but more often than not, and something that I've been asked by many people in Toastmasters is, what should I talk about next? How do I find my next subject? And we get people who are starving for subjects. They can't think of what to talk about. And a lot, by no means all, and I'm not decrying anybody here, but a lot of our speeches, mine included, are trivial. If somebody puts a challenge in front of me, I tend to grab it and run towards it at top speed. And when I joined Toastmasters and somebody told me there was this thing called a DTM, I charged it at that like, a rhinoceros that had taken drugs. I barreled my way through it. I had joined several clubs for a variety of reasons. But if I turned up at a club and they said we're short of a speaker, I used to say, I've got a speech ready. And I would spend the next 20 minutes going, what am I going to talk about? What am I going to talk about? Making up a speech in my head. So, and that's okay to do that at Toastmasters, and we get feedback and it helps us to improve. But what TED, or more specifically, we're talking about TEDx, and externally, the X is for external, an externally organized TED event. And it's ideas worth sharing. If you want to give a TEDx speech, your idea needs to be something that moves the needle, that actually people who come and watch it think, isn't that amazing? And that's what you want. You want something that helps people, or something that just makes people think. Anybody that wants to watch my TEDx speech, please do. My TEDx speech was about caring for my late wife when she had Alzheimer's. And I gave that speech partly because I wanted people to think, oh, he's a really nice guy. Wasn't that nice of him to do that? But mostly, I gave that speech to let other people in the same circumstance know that despite Alzheimer's being a dreadful, cruel disease, there's still a life to be had. And that if you get into the position of having to care for someone with Alzheimer's, it's not the end of the world. Yes, it's tough, but there's some good times to be had in there. At the same event, somebody gave a talk about, now it's a difficult word to say, and for my English friends, I apologise, or even non-Scottish, I should say, to be all-inclusive, refugee. Now, Ouija is a slang word for anyone from Glasgow. If you're from Glasgow, you are a Glaswegian. But in Glasgow, we shorten that to Ouija. But she gave a talk about refugees, and that was refugees who came to Glasgow and were welcomed into the city. The people brought them into their hearts and made them honorary citizens. And what this girl did was she organised, and she went to supermarkets and asked them for carrier bags. And she asked them for toothpaste and deodorant and soap and things like that. And she put together a welcome package to give to every refugee who arrived in Glasgow. But she did more than that. She got the people of Glasgow to write welcome letters individually to the refugees coming into Glasgow. And that brought a tear to my eye. And I just think that's the sort of thing that TEDx is about, because that moves the needle. Instead of people condemning refugees, and being unwelcome and giving it, go back where you belong and things like that. Glasgow took this to heart, and ordinary citizens sent them welcome letters. Another talk that day that moved the needle was somebody giving her experience of being a kidney donor to a stranger. This woman donated her kidney to a stranger. And there's a program you can go on a list, and they give you blood tests and things like that. And then if somebody comes up that needs a kidney, you're prepared to donate it, because we can all live with just one kidney. I wouldn't be brave enough to do that. It takes a really, really brave person to do that. But she talked about that, and that is the sort of thing that TEDx is about. It's about things that go above and beyond. I was speaking to Brian Skelton before we started here tonight, or as we were all coming online. Brian has an amazing speech, an absolutely amazing speech. And Brian has moved me to tears. And I've followed Brian's journey through Toastmasters from day one. And Brian's speech is something that can move the needle. And that's what TEDx is about. So, yeah, and so don't think that your average Toastmasters speech can cut it. Don't think that TEDx is a route to advertising your business. TEDx is about altruism. It's about people who want to stand up there and give away a slice of themselves. And you really need to be giving something of yourself. And that's what it's all about. So make sure that if you want to get on TEDx, that you are prepared to give away a slice of yourself. If you do want to get on TEDx, one of the things that you have to do is apply. Now, there's a myth that you can't apply for a TEDx speech, you have to be invited. That's not true. You can see there in the background, there is an address there. I hope it's clear enough, depending what device you're watching there. But I think it's TEDx.com/TEDx/events. And that will tell you, there's a search box and you can just type London in there and it will tell you all the London events that are coming up. And when you find an event and think, I would love to be on that stage. And I have to say, it was a fantastic experience. And different events have different limitations. I'll talk about those later. But it's a fantastic experience. And they are also big ticket price events. The event that I went to had a maximum audience of 100, but those people were paying £60 a ticket. So £60 per ticket. So if you've got 100 people paying £60, admittedly, they got lunch as well, and they got teas and coffees and refreshments and things like that. But you want to make absolutely sure that you're giving those people value for money. So when you decide that's the event I want to go for, there may well be a theme. Check that out. At the moment, Tedx London, and let me just lift my notes here because I've got many of them. Tedx London are looking for people, and they're looking for people who can speak about climatic change and environmental science, advances and new discoveries in health, epidemiology and genomics, design and engineering for social change, global empowerment of women and girls, LGBTQI rights, research and progress in gender equality, inclusive technology. And there are a few more, but I won't read them any further because right now, if your speech is not about inclusiveness and it's not about gender equality or empowerment, it's unlikely you would get selected for that event. And should you apply for an event and not get accepted because your application was inappropriate, it didn't meet their criteria, it's unlikely that a second application the following year would be successful. So make sure that what you want to talk about is suited to the event that you're applying for. That's very important. There are different types of TEDx events. The standard TEDx event is named after the town, city, or area in which it's being held. So there is a Tedx London, but I'm sure there are other TEDx's as well. And you can see on the map there where some of the dots are. And you can, if you go to that URL, it will tell you what events are on in and around London. And right now, there's lots of youth events which are aimed at like school kids and young college kids. So they might have a different theme, and it could be something that you've got to enhance people's education or to help kids in the future. But never go and look at the theme and then decide what you're going to talk about, right? Because that way lies disaster. So make sure that you've got an idea that is definitely worth spreading and will make a difference to people's lives, and then look at what the various TEDx venues are looking for. For a standard TEDx event, they're only allowed 100 people in the audience, but they can live stream them out to other events. There's lots of other criteria. For example, you cannot organize a TEDx event and speak at it. And that's to stop people abusing the system and setting up an event just so that they can speak at it. So, and you have to apply for the events. Now, the application for an event is probably the most important thing that you can do. If you want to speak on a TEDx stage, your application, it needs to be positive and it needs to sell you really well. It needs to be short, it needs to be to the point, and it needs to be on the theme. And it needs to be just one idea. If you say that you've got a speech about how to save the rainforest and combat global warming, that's two ideas. You can speak about the impact that one has on the other and vice versa, but you only want to try and put one idea to the organizers so that just so that it doesn't complicate their lives. If it's too long-winded and it's a difficult read, they won't go for it. Also, if it's not your passion, if it's not something that you are really passionate about, if it's not something you've been pushing for a long time, and it's not part of your core being, chances are it won't be the organizer's passion either, and you won't get accepted. But if you're on topic, you've kept it short, you've kept it precise, and you don't get accepted, don't give up. That's really important. Don't give up. Have another go. But also, and I'm always kind of loath to say this to people, because in my life, I have done things that I never, ever thought possible. Just things that wouldn't have, entered my mind. Like just to give you an idea, I was brought up in a council housing estate in the west of Scotland. And I was, I suppose, what people would call factory fodder. I was never expected to make anything of my life, and I was expected to leave school and a job either on a building site, in a factory, or as I did, in the shipyards. And I took a job as a welder in the shipyards. And I was really lucky. I was very lucky in that I realized very quickly that there was no future for me in the shipyards. And that was one of these road to Damascus moments where something just went ping. I was on my way home on a Friday, and I was looking forward to the weekend and going out for a couple of beers with my friends and the usual things we did at the weekend. And I just was looking about me, and I suddenly realized there was nobody over 55 on the bus, because anybody who'd been a welder since the days as an apprentice were either dead or on long-term sickness benefit due to emphysema, COPD, things like that. Because back then there were no masks or anything, or well, there were masks, but only to protect your eyes from the welding gear. There was nothing to stop you breathing in molten metal fumes. So, yeah. So I hesitate to tell people not to aim for the moon. And if you miss, you'll hit the stars anyway. You know, but don't set your sights too high with your TEDx talk. There are some events that a typical TEDx event gets 100 applications. And this is just a typical small town TEDx event. And generally you've got about 12 speakers or so. So we're talking about an 8-to-1 ratio. So for every 8 people that apply, 1 gets accepted. However, if you were to apply for Tedx London, there's probably 1,000 people will be applying for them. And that cuts your chances remarkably. Okay, so like my local event is TEDx Glasgow, and most of the people that get on the stage at TEDx Glasgow, not all, but most of them are celebrities of one sort or another. The event that I spoke at, there was a war correspondent, a well-known radio statistician, and a few other really well-known people. So it's hard to get onto those big events. So bear that in mind. Don't plow all your energy into an event that you've got very few chances of achieving. By all means, apply for it, but don't put your whole body and soul into it. The odds are not in your favor. But there are other events not too far away that will have a much better chance of you getting on that stage. I was fortunate with my event in that I got invited to speak at TEDx in Portobello, and I was ever so grateful for that invite, and I think it went okay. That's not for me to judge. I don't actually see an event for TEDx London at the moment. There are some TEDx women's events and some TEDx youth events in London, but I don't see one for the main TEDx London event at the moment anyway. But do go to that website and have a search. Another thing to consider before you apply to speak at a TEDx event is offer to volunteer. Volunteer for your local TEDx event or the one you want to speak at. And that way you'll get to know the team. And again, yes, I suppose that's you know, playing the game a little bit. But if you volunteer and you give something of yourself and you go into that thinking, yeah, it would be nice to get on the stage here, but come what may, I am going to give the best of myself here, and I'm going to do what I can to help this event move forward, then that does give you a better chance of getting on stage. I was really lucky when I volunteered for Tedx Glasgow, and I got to be the guy that escorted the speakers to the stage. They called it the speaker wrangler role, because it was like herding cats, because you had to know where all the speakers were all the time and make sure that you had them in the green room 20 minutes before they were due on stage. And it was tough going, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. And it's great. It's great to be a part of it. The Glasgow one is what they call a tier 2 event, which means that they've got a license for more than 100 seats. And I think it was 3,000 people that were at that event, and they were paying £85 a ticket. And TEDx events are not allowed to make a profit. The money get ploughed back into the rental of the venue and the equipment and providing lunches and all sorts of things. So there's some big events, some small events, but even the smallest of events, there's a degree of kudos in it, because, as I say, you get so many people applying for every event that it's a great thing to be chosen for one. I see somebody's put in the chat there, Janet Alkema organised her own TEDx event in Farnham, Surrey, 2 to 3 years ago. Yes, yep, absolutely. If you want to get involved in TEDx, you can apply for a licence and run an event. As I said, you're not allowed to speak at the ones that you run, but you can hand the licence over to somebody in the following year, perhaps, and then speak at the event. It's a very worthwhile thing. So even if you don't particularly want to speak at an event, maybe you could get involved in running one. And that way you can share a dozen ideas that move the needle rather than just talking about your own single idea. If you decide that you want to speak at a TEDx event, get a coach. Okay? Most TEDx events will have coaches, and I don't think the coaches charge if they're associated with TEDx, but get a coach. Okay? You don't get feedback at a TEDx event. And one of the reasons that most of us are in Toastmasters is we joined because we wanted to improve our communication skills. Very few of us joined because we wanted to become a better leader. We joined because we wanted to become a better communicator. And we constantly get feedback when we stand up and speak at our Toastmasters events. And that feedback, we've always got a choice about taking it on board or not taking it on board. And I've had some feedback, and I've genuinely thought, and it may sound a bit big-headed, and that's because I am, but I've genuinely thought, that's nonsense. That is absolute nonsense. And it was. But there are other times when I think, you know what? That's the 5th time I've heard someone say that. Maybe there's some merit in it. So we can judge our own feedback and improve through it. But TEDx, it's a one-shot deal. You know, you stand up there and you speak for 2, maybe 3 times as long as you would in a Toastmasters meeting, but you're not getting feedback at the end of it other than the level of applause. And if you're there at the end and the applause starts and it sounds a bit like you've maybe not done as well as you thought, but that's all the feedback you'll get. So you want to go into that TEDx talk with the best speech you can possibly give. And to do that, you need a coach. Do not use a coach that likes you, okay? That's going to give you the wrong kind of feedback. Don't practice in front of friends and family and say, how do you think that went? Because they're either going to tell you it's really good or they're just going to rubbish you. They are not going to give you genuine feedback. So get yourself a coach. And you need to get that coach before you make your application, because you want your coach to help you with your application as well. You want somebody to go through that application process with you, and you want them to hone that application and make sure that it's really on point. It fits with the theme, it fits with the type of event, and that it shows you in the best possible light and doesn't leave somebody having to read through it and interpret what you're saying. So yeah, get a coach. And that coach might be another Toastmaster. You know, you don't have to go out and pay for a coach. I'm not suggesting that you do that. It's an option. You can pay for a coach. And the good thing about paying for a coach, of course, is that if they're not very good, you can sack them. If you choose a friend or a fellow Toastmaster and they're not very good, you're kind of stuck with them. It's like being in a family WhatsApp group. You can never leave. If you're in a family WhatsApp group, there's no way out, because if you leave that group, people are going to be talking about you for the rest of your life. Who the heck does she think she is coming in? You just can't do it. It's the same with a coach. If you've got somebody that you're not paying and they're well known to you, you can't sack them. You just can't. So bear that in mind. But District 91 has got some incredible speakers, some incredible Toastmasters, and some incredibly nice people who will coach you just because they are nice people. And I'm sure you all know plenty of them. And I know people who have been coached by people in D91 and have done an amazing job of it. And that's their way of giving back. And I'm not going to name names, but if you're looking for somebody to coach you within Toastmasters, look to people who have been past leaders. Look to people who have been area, division, and district leaders. Those are the sort of people who are prepared to give of themselves in an altruistic fashion. So those are the people you would be looking to. I did mention earlier there's several types of event, and you need to bear this in mind, that it's not just about a TEDx event where you turn up and speak. Those of you that know Zoom and putting backgrounds on and things like that will know that I can't read what's written on my slide because it's mirrored at my end so that you can see it the right way around. But they've got standard events, university events, youth events, ed events, which are education events, salon events, which are not quite TEDx talks, but it's a gathering of people that want to be involved in TEDx. There's TEDx women events, and TEDx women events do have male speakers, as long as the purpose of your speech is to help women in some way, shape, or form. It is mostly female speakers, and female speakers will, quite rightly, get precedence, but you can have male speakers at a TEDx women events. There are business events, but they tend to be internal events. They've got library events, so they've got all sorts of different types of events. So make sure, because I had somebody who's in my mastermind group, and he applied for a TEDx event, but he hadn't been paying attention, and he didn't ask his mastermind group for help or approval. And he applied for an event and got knocked back. And it was only after, when I spoke to him, I realized that he'd applied for a TEDx ed event, an education event, and his speech wasn't educational. So it was never going to go forward, but he didn't know the difference. He just saw TEDx and applied for that. So make sure that you are applying for the right event. Also, check their terms and conditions and make sure that you're prepared to comply with them. Most of them don't have much by way of terms and conditions. It's maybe a bit of a grand phrase for what I'm actually talking about. But what we're talking about here is rehearsals, photo shoots, bioinformation, intro. Right? Many of us don't even think about the introduction, and we just leave it to the MC to create the intro. And what happens if they go on your website or your LinkedIn profile or something and they find a really juicy snippet about you, something really wonderful, something powerful, and it turns out it was the power opening line of your speech and they use it in their intro, and then you use it again. So write your own intro. Give it to the MC and tell the MC two things. One, read that verbatim and do not alter it. Don't try and enhance it. Don't make jokes with it. And don't tell anybody that I wrote it. Because very early on, I handed somebody an intro and they said, our next speaker gave me this intro to read. Wasn't that big of him? And then went to read it out. And I just thought, how could you do such a thing? But people don't understand. So tell them why you're doing it. And that way you'll get the best possible intro. But you need to give your bio in so that they can advertise with it. They might want you to come for a photo shoot. They might have a dress rehearsal day. So make sure that you can commit to all of these things when you're making your application. And the best way to do that, as I said, is to volunteer the year before, or even for a couple of years before, because TEDx isn't going away. Don't be desperate to get on the stage right away. It's not that desperate. It's much better that you give that speech to the best of your ability and that you get people to go away with that wow factor, just thinking, goodness, that person has made me think differently. You might not change anybody's life, but if you can get someone just to consider a change or just to appreciate something they never thought of before. Like, I recall meeting a friend of Margaret's, my late wife. I was out getting some shopping, and she said, and I bumped into this friend who I knew vaguely, but she was a good friend of Margaret's. And she said, how's Margaret? And I said, not too bad. I said, you know, she has Alzheimer's. She said, oh, I didn't know that. Which home is she in? And that was her first thought, was, which care home is Margaret in? I was like, no, she's at home. I said, she's probably sitting at home now, playing music on her Kindle, because Margaret loved to play little YouTube music videos. One of the joys of dementia and the short-term memory loss is that she could play the same song half a dozen times because she didn't realize that she'd just heard it. Oh, goodness, Lucinda. Oh, grim. The MC read out my private email notes to him and not my title or intro for my speech. Yeah, you really have to nail down what you want the MC to do and tell them in no uncertain terms, this is what you need to do. And if possible, hand it to them on a piece of paper before the event. The one that I was at, we did have rehearsals, and the MC got everyone to bring a printed out introduction with them and hand it to her, and then she learned them all so that she was able to do it really slickly on the day. So you have to be involved. It's not just write a speech, get a bit of coaching, deliver a speech. You need to be involved in the process. TEDx is very community oriented, and they want people that are committed and want the event to be a huge success. And the way to do that, I say, volunteer for a year, even two beforehand. But even if you don't do that, get involved with your local TEDx community and make sure you're keeping in touch with them. Once you've been accepted, make sure you're keeping in touch with them. Make sure you turn up for any events that they want you there for, whether it be a photo shoot or rehearsal, or sometimes the whole different groups do it in different ways. The one that I was at, we had 2 informal chat days where we just sat with each other and talked about how ready our speeches were, how far down the process we were, had anybody got stuck, anything like that. And it was that involvement. And it turned out by the end of it, we were all friends. And like best friends do over the years, we immediately lost touch. But during the process, we were still really good friends. And there is one person I occasionally exchange a message with. And his TEDx speech was about coming back from the Gulf War, a completely broken man. He was a wreck. He was a disaster area. And his dad gave him an old car, which was a wreck and a complete disaster area. And he tells the story of him renovating that car and renovating himself as he renovated the car. And that was a beautiful speech. And I do still occasionally exchange a Facebook message with them. Yeah. And as I say, like anything with good friends, those messages get further and further apart. But there was a great community spirit at the time, and it's important to immerse yourself in it. But just coming up to the end now, and then we'll take some questions. But the key thing is, TEDx is all about ideas worth sharing, and you have to be 100% certain that your idea is genuinely worth sharing. And check how long your speech is, because most people think that TEDx speeches are 18 minutes. They're not. Different organizations have different lengths of time. Mine was restricted to 12. So my speech is 12 minutes. If you've not heard or seen it, it's on my website, which is www.mcginty.net. Please feel free to go and have a look at it. So the timing is very different with different organizations, and it's just another thing to check. But right at the core, it has to be that idea worth sharing, and it just needs to move society's needle just that little bit. The further you can move it, the better. But if you can move society's needle just that far, you've done a good job, and it's a worthy TEDx speech. So I'll finish it there, because I think I was allowed 40 minutes roughly, and I like to be a bit picky and do 40 minutes exactly. So back over to you, Andy.
James, thank you very much indeed. First of all, can we just have a big round of applause, please? Unmute yourselves, and round of applause, please, for James.
Thank you. Thank you.
Incredibly interesting, incredibly compelling. So thank you very much indeed for that. So we'll open up the floor now. We've got about 15 minutes for questions. Brian, I can see your hand shooting straight up. So we'll go to Brian first.
Yeah, James, it's interesting what you said at the end about the timing. I was told that it was 17 minutes.
Yeah.
And I was told that they said that the reason it's 17 minutes is because people get bored after 17 minutes. So obviously that's not true then.
No, a TED Talk, like TED Talks were designed to be 18 minutes, and the time was scientifically decided to be 18 minutes because people get bored after that. But you can imagine that's not all people, and some get bored a lot sooner. Again, I don't want to disparage anybody, but I bet you every one of you on this call tonight has drifted off during somebody's 7-minute speech at some time or another. We just can't help ourselves. But yes, but different organisers will have different times, because if you cut it down to 12 minutes, you can stick an extra 3 speakers into the same time slot. So, but you're right, it was about the boredom threshold, but check the timings, because some of them might be 18 minutes, but some might be a lot shorter.
So, and just one other quick question: are the speeches in person at the moment, or are they on Zoom?
There have been some virtual ones. There haven't been any in-person ones recently, but we are starting to come back out, and there are some that are doing studio events where people go to a studio. So all the speakers are in a studio and they're being streamed out onto the web. So yeah, but it will be coming back to face-to-face, because it's tough without an audience. It really is. But there have been some virtual events, but others have just not ran their events. They've just lost 2020 and 2021. But yeah, hopefully we will be seeing live events again soon.
Lovely. Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brian. Panos, you've got your hand up.
Hello, James and friends. Hello from Greece and District 109. Thank you so much for tonight. First, I want to say that one line I will remember for life: the analogy with the family WhatsApp, because I've been there. This is one of the best analogies I've heard in my life. You had me right there, James. Thank you for this golden nugget. I do have a question for you. I'm a curious individual, and I join lots of forums, especially on an app called Clubhouse. So I get to listen to a lot of people give out their advice for free. And I've noticed that there's a lot of them that refer to their TED Talk as a credibility building tool, as if having a TED Talk puts you in a certain bracket of society, that you're regarded as either a celebrity or as an expert in some kind of area. At the same time, there are a few of them that have a message to share. So I wonder, from the set of your observations, do you think that TED is perhaps commoditized, at least maybe just a little bit, or maybe it's been like overused as a brand? Because I can tell you that the ones that have a message and they're happy to just go plant it out there. They're happy to be sharing this message everywhere. You know, they leave this message. So I wonder if for some speakers, TED might actually not be the ideal platform. Thank you, James.
Yeah, absolutely. You see the picture of me in the background there. I use that picture all over the web. I have commoditized TEDx, and I make no bones about it. I like to think that my speech has helped. Well, I know my speech has helped a lot of people. Alzheimer's Scotland use my speech as part of their training for carers, and I'm really touched by that, because I gave that speech because I wanted to get my message out there. But I'm not naive enough to think that I couldn't use it to perhaps gain a little bit more kudos. And I like to think that that's where most people go. But being in the professional speaking world, I know that absolutely there are people chasing a TEDx stage simply for the commercial benefits of it. So it has been commoditized. I wrote a book, right? Now, most people say everyone's got a book in them. I wrote a book just for social proof. If you asked me what was in my book, I couldn't tell you. I mean, I wrote it word for word. I wrote all of it. I've never read it. But if I say that I'm like trainer, speaker, coach, and author, now that looks good. That looks good. And they go on Amazon and find my book. They go, he is an author. And he's a TEDx speaker. So it gives you kudos. But yes, some people do abuse the privilege, but I still think that it's a very, very worthwhile thing to do. And there are more people giving TED and TEDx talks because they believe in their message than anything else. So yeah, it has been commoditized, but not overly so. And it's still very worthwhile doing, and people will generally recognize those that are altruistic. Yeah.
Fantastic. Panos, thank you very much. A couple of bits and pieces come in on the chat. Lucinda says, never chase a TEDx, master your idea worth sharing, and TEDx will appear and you will get invited.
Yes, yeah, that's absolutely true. That is absolutely true. I gave my TEDx speech, I originally gave as an entry for a cut down version of it, as an entry for the International Toastmasters International Speech Contest. And I managed to get to district with it, and I then failed spectacularly. If you're going to fail, there's no point in failing in a simple fashion. I broke down in tears on the stage about 4 minutes in and just couldn't continue because I had given the speech before I was ready, and the emotion in the speech was too much for me. But it was after that somebody came to me and said, could you make that speech longer and give it as a TEDx speech? And I thought, wow, yes, I could. So yeah, if you've got that big idea, and it's like everything, the law of attraction, okay? I do not read into the law of attraction. I know for a fact that if I sit down and will the universe to deliver me a brand new Jaguar XJS, it just won't. But if I desire a brand new Jaguar XJS and I really want it, then I might start taking steps to get one. I might start doing a bit more work. I might try and earn some more money. I might not waste money on other trivia and things like that. So the law of attraction is really about setting out what it is you want to do and taking steps to get there. So nothing appears by magic. So yeah, don't chase that TEDx, but think about doing TEDx. Find out where your local event is, do your volunteering bit, and keep mastering your idea. And eventually somebody's going to say, there's a stage, jump in the red spot. Yeah, absolutely correct.
Cool. Thank you very much. Anybody else got any questions? Don't have any hand. Andy Newman.
Yeah, thank you, James. When you look at your TEDx speech or speeches, even the best ones, do you look at them thinking, I could have improved this or I could have improved that, knowing what I know now? And if so, what are the tips, or other people's great speeches as well?
No, I don't. I don't. I look at World Championship of Public Speaking speeches and say, I could improve that speech because of the nature of them. Most TED or TEDx speeches have got a core somewhere, and there's a wow moment. Bill Gates, I don't know if anybody's seen Bill Gates's TED speech, where he releases mosquitoes from a jar into the room. You can't improve that. That is not improvable. You could go and say, oh, his vocal variety wasn't great there. He could have made a bigger gesture there, could have done, but bam, mosquitoes in the room. That's not improvable. And that's the point to your TEDx speeches. It's that one core thing, that moment in time. And I've coached people for TEDx. And that's what we've done. We've worked on that moment in time thing. And the rest of the speech can be useless. It can be really bad. But if you bring out that one thing, like, how can you possibly ever criticize a speech where somebody lifts up their blouse and shows you the scar where they took her kidney out to give to a stranger? You can't improve in that. Her speech was awful. She wasn't a speaker. I could, if she'd been at Toastmasters, she would have been getting a lot of quality advice that she needed. But the bit where she lifted up her blouse and showed her scar, wow, blown away moment. So no, I never look at them and think we can improve that. Yeah.
Brian?
Yeah, I just said, well, the question I want to ask is, obviously the talk I want to do, quite a few people have seen it. Does that matter that other people have seen it if it goes on to YouTube? If you're going to do a TED Talk?
That's a good thing. That's absolutely a good thing, because your idea is out there in the universe and you can point the organisers to it and say, I'm going to do something based around this. This is what it's about. And so yes, having your speech out there already with lots of people having seen it, absolutely fantastic. Yeah, well worthwhile.
Yeah, saying that, would it be okay, or would I have to change it a little bit, or could it be the same, or? Well,
it depends how long it is at the moment. I can't remember how long it is.
It's about 20 minutes. I could cut it down a bit.
Yeah, so if you cut it down, it's like pruning a tree. Which branch has to go? Which branch, if I remove it, will make the rest of the tree look better? And that's what you need to be thinking about. Not what don't I need. It's about what do I prune to make the whole thing look better.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So, And so it's a quality speech that yours is, and it'll be tough to remove bits from that. But yeah, you do need to get it down to their time scale. So yeah, it will need a bit of pruning. Yeah. And I see Antonia's put in there. Sorry, not Antonia, Lucinda, TEDx is a talk and conversational in style. That's largely true, because a lot of people who go to give TED Talks have never been to Toastmasters or any other speaking clubs or anything like that. So they tend to have a style that we in Toastmasters don't adhere to. So it's okay to turn up and do it Toastmaster style, but it's okay to be a bit more as if you're almost having a one-on-one conversation with the audience. So, yeah.
Lovely, thank you. And Lucinda gave a TEDx talk a few months ago, according to Antonia. So Lucinda, obviously an expert on this.
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, I think we've got time for one more question. Any offers? Andy?
Yeah, if you're doing, for example, a 12-minute speech or a 20-minute speech, would you cut it down a little bit from that, say, for example, 11-minute speech or what have you, to allow for audience reaction in between?
Oh, there's a question. Do you do that with your 7-minute speeches? I do. Yeah, every speech that I do, I try and allow for audience reaction. But sometimes, it's a little bit big-headed, isn't it, to think they're going to laugh for 12 seconds at this point? What if they don't? So yeah, you have to build in time for that. But yeah, that's part of the building process. So I think, Andy, I saw Mohammed's hand go up there at the same time as Andy, so we might just have time for one more.
Yeah, absolutely, Mohammed.
Thank you, James, for enlightening us. It's really enlightening. Just one. If you have few ideas, you feel like few ideas which are worth sharing, how do you narrow it down? Do you have any tips? And second question, do you do this particular coaching yourself?
Right. Answer to the first question. That's a tough call. It's a personal call. I would use the same method that I do for my to-do list. I write them down and I just give each one a number and say which one's got the highest number, and I would focus on that. And there's no reason why you can't do 2 TEDx talks. You can do more than 1 TEDx talk. Now, do I do coaching? There's a tough question. I do coaching. At the moment, I am coaching 2 people. pro bono. I always do pro bono coaching. I am doing 2 people for free at the moment. Therefore, I would not be taking on anybody else unpaid. I do take on paid clients. Most people can't afford me. And I say that with absolute honesty. Yeah, I don't come cheap because I do a lot of training during the day just to keep the fridge full. And that means my coaching has to be done out of hours, and I'm giving up my leisure time to coach people. So I have to make it worth my while. And basically, if I give you a discount, it's $6,000 for a year's coaching. And most people are not overly prepared to pay that sort of money. So hopefully that gives you an idea. And I'm not here looking for business tonight. And I would be very unlikely to engage anybody who's been on this call for a fee, because that's not why I'm here tonight.
Cool, thank you very much. The one thing I would say about coaching is that, regardless of how much people charge, shop around and make sure that you understand the best fit, and also beware of people that are charging 2 cans of lager, because they may not be necessarily the kind of coach that you want. So sometimes you do need to pay for that premium service. But if you are looking for a coach, you need to shop around. You need to make sure that you are aware of all of the options.
Yeah.
So can I have a very quick final round of applause, please, for James? I think that was just a brilliant session, and some really, really good Q&A on that. Next Sunday at 7 o'clock here in the UK, we have Steve Kachik, and he is dealing with difficult people because, of course, we've all had that. We've all dealt with difficult people, and it's going to be a really, really interesting workshop. So join us next Sunday at 7 o'clock here in the UK. From James and myself, thank you very much indeed. Have yourselves a wonderful week. Enjoy the bank holiday in the UK. Enjoy the sunshine. And we will see you again very, very soon. So thank you very much and have a great night. Cheers all. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thanks very much, folks. And thanks again. And I'll see you soon somewhere else, Andy. Okay, cheers just now. Thanks very much.
Cheers. Thanks.
Bye now.